Hi gang, and welcome back to your weekly bite-sized true crime fix. Today's case is one that I have been kind of waiting to cover all year. One that I had ready, it was locked, it was loaded for months, and then bang, ITV made a show about it. It showed earlier this year and it kind of put me off. I thought maybe I shouldn't tell you about a case that has become one of the most watched dramas of 2020. Thank you, David Tennant. But you know what? This story is absolutely shocking, and the trial of Dennis Nilsen took place this week 37 years ago. So, welcome to the anniversary. Shwa-na-na-na, 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 shwa-na-na-na. If you haven't seen Des, a 3-part ITV drama that aired earlier this year, I suggest the first thing that you do when you finish watching this video is go and check it out. At the time of his capture, he was Britain's worst serial killer, pre-Harold Shipman, of course. Dennis Nilsen preyed on boys and men, and yes, his trial took place this week in 1983. But that isn't where our story begins. We're starting with Dennis Nilsen's first victim, who was only 14 years old. Stephen Holmes met his killer in a chance encounter in a pub in December of 1978, where he was trying to buy alcohol, but he wasn't having much luck. Dennis Nilsen invited the youngster to his house with the promise of alcohol and them listening to music. It's said that he thought Stephen was much older. The following morning, he reached for a necktie, he straddled the 14-year-old and he strangled him into unconsciousness before filling a bucket with water and drowning him. He then washed his body before placing him in the bed and masturbating over his corpse. He waited for rigor mortis to pass and then kept the body underneath the floorboards of his house. Stephen Holmes' body remained underneath the floorboards for almost 8 months before Dennis Nilsen built a bonfire in the garden. In October of 1979, so only a few months after he burned the body of Stephen, he attempted to murder a student from Hong Kong named Andrew Ho. Dennis Nilsen attempted to strangle him. He managed to flee from his flat. He reported the incident to the police, but Andrew decided not to press charges. In December 1979, Dennis Nilsen encountered a 23-year-old Canadian student by the name of Kenneth Ockenden. He was on a tour of England, he was visiting relatives, and they met and drank together in a West End pub. When he learnt that Kenneth was a tourist, he offered to show him around several London landmarks, and Kenneth agreed. He strangled him with a cord of his own headphones as Kenneth was listening to music. His own headphones being Dennis's. He said that he dragged him across the floor with the wire wrapped around his neck as he strangled him before pouring himself a glass of rum and continuing to listen to music on the headphones which he had used to strangle Kenneth. The following day, Dennis Nilsen bought a Polaroid camera and he photographed Kenneth Ockenden's body in various poses. After keeping his body on the bed for several hours and watching TV, he wrapped him in plastic bags and he put him beneath the floorboards. 4 times over the next 2 weeks, Dennis Nilsen got Kenneth's body from beneath the floorboards. He put him in an armchair and he watched TV and drank alcohol with the body just sitting there. The nature of this series means that I just don't have enough time to tell you about all of Dennis Nilsen's victims, even though they all mean just as much as each other. Please use the research links for in-depth information. This one is just, Inside Dennis Nilsen's home, the victims were usually given food and alcohol and then they were strangled, typically with a ligature, so a necktie or wires or something. They were either strangled to death or until they become unconscious, and they were usually drowned in his bathtub, in his sink, or in a bucket of water. He always bathed, clothed and retained the bodies inside his residence for several weeks, occasionally months, before he dismembered them. Prior to dissecting his victims, Dennis Nilsen would remove their internal organs. The victims that he killed between 1982 and 1983 at a flat that he lived in Muswell Hill were retained in the flat. And this is how he got caught, but we'll get onto that in a second. He flushed their flesh and smaller bones down the toilet, but again, we'll get onto that in just a second. Dennis Nilsen has confessed to killing 15 men between 1978 and 1983. There are 12 confirmed cases, but 15 is what he confessed to, and there are 5 survivors, some of which actually testified at his murder trial. It took a long time for Dennis Nilsen to be caught, but the way that he was caught, usually you find people there going down the road, they speed, and then the police pull them over and there's a body in the boot. There's a gun on the front seat, or there's a killer kit on the back seat. The way Dennis Nilsen was caught is as bizarre as the man himself. The murders were first discovered by a Dyna-Rod employee. So he is a guy called Michael Catram, and he responded to plumbing complaints that Dennis Nilsen had made, along with other tenants of 23 Cranley Gardens in February of 1983. When the plumber opened a drain cover on the side of the house, he discovered that it was packed with a flesh-like substance and numerous bones. He left. He came back the next day, and when he got there, the drain had been cleared. It aroused suspicions. The plumber discovered scraps of flesh and 4 bones in a pipe leading from the drain to the top flat of the house, the flat that was occupied by Dennis Nilsen. The police were called, and 3 police officers waited outside the house until Dennis Nilsen returned from work, and you'll know this if you watch Des. They went into his house. They immediately noticed the smell of rotting flesh, and Dennis questioned the police as to why they were interested in his drains, and they were like, bruv, there's human remains in there. He pretended to be shocked and was like, good grief, how awful. And then one of the police officers was like, don't mess about, where's the rest of the body? And he responded so calmly, admitting that the remainder of the body could be found in 2 plastic bags that were in a wardrobe. They didn't open the wardrobe, but they asked Dennis Nilsen, were there any other body parts there? He said, and I quote, "It's a long story. It goes back a long time. I'll tell you everything. I want to get it off my chest. Not here, at the police station." He was arrested and cautioned on suspicion of murder. As he was being escorted to the police station, he was asked if the remains in his flat belonged to 1 person or 2. And he said 15 or 16 since 1978. 1 bag was found to contain 2 dissected torsos. 1 had been vertically dissected, and a shopping bag contained various internal organs. The second bag contained a human skull with no flesh on it, a severed head, and a torso with arms attached, but hands missing. At the police station, Dennis Nilsen confessed there were further remains stowed in a tea chest in his living room. Other remains were in an upturned drawer in his bathroom. A skull and a section of a torso was in the tea chest. That's when Dennis Nilsen accompanied the police to Melrose Avenue, which was his former address, and they discovered over 1,000 fragments of bone in the garden, and many of them had been blackened by fire. Now, you can be forgiven for thinking this is hook, line and sinker. They've got him, lock him up, throw away the key, take him to jail, but it's not that easy. He pleaded not guilty on the grounds of diminished responsibility, so there was a trial. The primary dispute between the prosecution and defense counsel was not whether Dennis Nilsen had killed the victims, because that much was pretty much guaranteed. It was his state of mind before and during the killings. During the trial, the court heard from witnesses whom Dennis Nilsen had tried to kill but survived. Douglas Stewart said that he woke up to find his ankles bound and himself being strangled. Paul Nobbs said that he didn't report his attack for fear that his sexuality was going to be discovered. And Carl Stotter testified that he was strangled and drowned before being revived. 2 psychiatrists testified on behalf of the defense. One diagnosed him with borderline false self, as if pseudo-normal narcissistic personality disorder with occasional outbreaks of schizoid disturbances, which is a lot to handle. But in a trial that lasted 11 days, the jury retired to consider their verdict. The following day, they returned with a majority verdict of guilty of 6 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, and a unanimous verdict of guilty in relation to the attempted murder of Paul Hobbs. Dennis Nilsen was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 25 years. And it was there that he remained. Dennis Nilsen died on the 12th of May 2018, and there you have it. I feel like so much emphasis is put on the killers and what was going through their mind and what was happening with them, and they get all the notoriety. It isn't about the people who died, and especially with this case, there are so many unidentified people. The ones that we do know are Stephen Holmes, Kenneth Ockenden, Martin Duffy, William Sutherland, Malcolm Barlow, John Howlett, Graham Allen, and Stephen Sinclair. Thank you for watching. Of course, there is so much to this story, as there always is, that I haven't been able to put in here, so use the description for all the links and the podcast and the documentaries that I watched, and I'll see you guys next time.